Those people do well naturally anyway. I mean, I've had people, some of the best people I've interviewed have always said,
Hi, everyone.
I don't think I'm going to get it. It's kind of fun.
So what we're going to talk about today is really the process of moving from your secure on-premise to hybrid and then into cloud. I think as you've heard throughout Next, at Google, we're invested in trying to reduce the obstacles, the concerns that you don't need to have to accelerate and elevate the way you do development so that you can grow businesses, grow your applications, and be successful. Especially in security, what we were talking about, as Ors pointed out, is cloud should be the immune system for you to protect you against cyber attacks, something you don't have to actively manage, something that in fact is there in the background always defending you. Now, we recognize that not all of you are in the same space in terms of moving to the third generation cloud. Many of you have on-premise facilities, have needs to have workloads that are both in an on-premise situation as well as in the cloud. And really the key is for us to give you the controls to allow you to manage the trust the way you need. As Niels pointed out, beyond just the underlying security and trust built into our core platform beneath Google, we need to continuously provide you the controls to access those capabilities so you can secure your workloads the way you need them to be. So at the core of what we're talking about at Google, the security is really based on 4 key principles: trust and transparency, control, audit compliance, and innovation. And what we mean by this is it's not just sufficient for us to have superior technology. Trust that you have in us and what we do is really built in being transparent about things. And that's part of Niels' talk earlier today, was one of the steps to give you a sense of what really goes on behind the scenes. In addition, for control, from enterprises and businesses, you need the ability to have access to the capabilities to configure and run your business and control the user, service, data access levels as you need. For audit and compliance, our commitment is to make sure that in addition to the certifications that we have on our cloud, we're going to be able to support you to get the certifications that you need to run your businesses. And of course, we're all focused on innovation, right? Whether it's the machine learning that Jeff talked about, essentially the superpower of having cloud machine learning added to your capabilities, really the ability to have you focus on your business and then for us to take care of the rest. So for today's talk, we're going to focus, however, on folks who are not yet in the Generation 3 cloud, right? And the common questions we get in security really fall into 5 main categories, right? How do you manage identity and access control so that the policies that you already have today can be reflected in the cloud that you move to? Network security. How do you create the isolation and trust zones that you need to segregate your users and information as you might like? Data protection. How is your data, your users' data, your customers' data protected? And how do you control that? Threats and vulnerabilities. How really access to and breaches and intrusions are handled so that you are protected up front. And ultimately, audit logging. The things that allow you to know what's going on in your systems, to know every access, every action. So in order to do this, we're going to use an example to walk you through a step-by-step process of migrating from an on-premise application to a hybrid situation where part of the application runs in cloud, and then finally to a full GCP instance. Now, to do this, we tried to pick a small representative example application. So we've created a meme gen application, which is built on a LAMP stack. It has a MySQL database and an Apache front end. And basically, it allows you to start out in the cloud, on-premise, and we'll move it step by step forward. So let's go. So the first step, as we talked about, was taking your existing identities and your policies, and how does that come with you in cloud so you don't have to change and do other things. So to help me talk through that, I'm going to invite Ameet Jani, who's the product manager for Identity for Cloud On, to walk you through Identity Federation.
Thank you, Andy. Oh, your voice. So Andy and I were walking through a potential scenario here, and we thought it would be kind of fun being relative, last day of a conference, kind of fun, I guess, but to walk through an actual customer type of example, right, to really represent what our customers go through. Andy and I have talked to a lot of customers, and we've hearing very...
We switched the outside screen.
We thought it'd be fun to kind of walk through what that would look like. So one of the things we thought we should walk you through is a typical scenario of a customer, right? You already have an identity provider. You already have a source of truth for your identities where you've defined users and groups. And what you really want is just to carry that with you into the cloud, right? And so what you're going to see is us do exactly that. We're going to use an IDP. We can talk through it, insert your name of your identity provider here, whether it's Active Directory or anybody else. And we're going to federate your users and groups to Google. And then the next thing we're going to do is just show you how those now exist. They're federated. All you have to do is assign permissions to your groups, and everybody's there. And then lastly, I think just to prove that this is a federated identity use case, we're going to delete a user and identity provider and show you how quickly that reflects. So just to highlight what we talked about here, you'll see these very complicated art graphics here, but you'll see the non-Google identity provider, your identity is your source of truth. It gets federated to Google, and then you just assign the users that are there. So why don't we jump into the demo? Andy's going to drive it for us here. But you'll see this is our identity provider. In this case, we used Ping. You can use any open source. You can use any identity provider that you like. Most of them come with a Google connector, as Ping does. And so the idea is then that you connect Ping to your Google environment, and your source of truth is now connected. So here you'll see, in this very simplified example, we have users that are assigned here. And each of these users are already assigned to a group. And so Andy will show you here that these groups exist. And I think the key ones to focus on are the network administrator, the network viewer, and the security administrator. These are the sample types of groups that we've created. And the users that we talked about earlier, which were Bob, Amy, and AJ, who are assigned to each of these groups. And we'll see how that carries over when you get into cloud. So then once you've federated, so here's examples of that group. Once those users and groups are federated, you'll be able to come to your Google console, which Andy will do now, and you'll be able to see both of those things, right? Just to prove that it has, in fact, federated. When you make a change in your identity provider, the users show up here. So here you'll see Bob, AJ, and of course Amy reflected here. And they're already assigned to those groups because the groups have also been federated with you. So as you click into AJ, for example, you'll be able to see he's already a member of this group. In this case, the network viewer group. And the same will be true for Bob, and the same will be true for Amy as well, right, in this example. Just to quickly touch on those roles, the rules are network viewer is obviously a read-only kind of role. A network admin is somebody who can create new networks and take networking type functionality. And a security admin, our hero of the story here, is the one who can do security actions, but not necessarily network actions. So then why don't we jump into the IAM window. So those of you who are familiar, you come into the Cloud Console. You'll see Andy's already created the group's already there. They pre-populate when you do a search or when you create a new member, and he's assigned them to groups. So here you can see the roles are already assigned: compute network admin, compute network viewer, and of course compute security admin. So those are predefined roles that already exist within IAM, and you can just assign them to the group. Note here, we didn't assign a single user to a role. That automatically gets inherited when you become a member of that group. So why don't we've kind of done the setup here. Why don't we actually live a day in the life of, let's pretend we're Amy. Amy was the security administrator. So Amy comes in, she logs into our single sign-on system here, and then she should get redirected directly into the Google console, the Google Cloud Console, or not. You can go to console.developer. Just as a show of hands, how many of you are using Ping? Just out of curiosity, trying to understand. OK. How many? I'm guessing most of you are Active Directory? OK, that's what I figured. Are there others of note that we should? You can scream them out. Woo! Google, OK. So here you see now Amy is logged in. You can see that she's in fact logged in. Because she's a security administrator, she really has no business going through common dashboards and GAE screens and GCE screens. So we'll jump into the networking screen here. Remember, she's a security administrator. So when we come to networks, as the option, you'll see she cannot, in fact, create networks. She can't do firewalls. She can't do, she can't do VPNs. She can't do routers and things like that. But in fact, when she goes into firewalls, she should be able to create a firewall. She is a security administrator, right, and take the action there. So again, she's already been assigned the role without having to explicitly do that. If we were to do the same for Bob, for example, we can come in and be Bob for a moment. You can see, in this case, that's me, but OK, here we are at Bob. Again, Bob is a network administrator, so no need to be in any common screen here. But if you jump into the networking, you'll find what you expect, right? That Bob can, in fact, create networks, can create VPNs, can create DNS, load balancers. But when you take it to the firewall rules, of course, is unable to do anything there. And then we can do the same for AJ as well, right? AJ, again, had a viewer role, so we'll let Andy jump into yep, here we go. So that we can jump into the networking itself, and you'll find, in fact, only read-only screens, right? You can take action, can only take viewership, but can't do any actions themselves, as expected, right? No rocket science here. So I think that's kind of the high-level overview of the identity sync. Today, most commercial and almost all open source identity providers have a natural bridge into Google Apps and Google, so that should naturally work. But let's walk through an example. We talked about concluding here with showing true federation. So why don't we delete AJ? And when you go into admin console and do a refresh, you'll find that AJ, fingers crossed, will have disappeared from all of this. There you go. AJ is no longer there. So it's a live system. It happens instantaneously. So you don't have to, the minute somebody decides to go on to better opportunities and are no longer at your company, you're able to remove them from your identity provider, and they completely get shut down from access to the cloud console. So that's the high-level summary here. Andy, why don't I transition it back to you?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Ameet.
Yep.
So lesson number 1 from migrating from your on-premise situation to either a hybrid or cloud is that you, in fact, can bring your identities. You don't need to recreate them. You're able to federate and use the existing privileges and IAM to enforce them. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the hybrid cloud. And so what do we mean by the hybrid cloud? So today, what we're going to talk to you about is first from the Mean Gem app in the on-premise situation. And those, you probably can't see it, but this is actually the on-premise server. So if we go to that on-premise server, this is the Meme Gem app for that server. And it's a little tiny on-premise server. It's live. The other thing we'll talk about is the project that we just showed you the controls and IAM for. So it's the MemeGen Next 16 application. And today, we have a front end. So we've split it now so that we're going to keep the back end on the server and have the front end showed up in cloud. So this is the front end, the instance PHP piece. And right now, though, if I go to that website, you notice it's not connecting to anything, because we actually haven't created a VPN, a trusted connection between the two. So we're going to fix that. So what we're going to do now is leverage the networking that we just talked about before. So I'm logged in as Kanji. And Kanji, if you might remember, whoops, is one of the other roles that has both network permissions and also has security permissions. Oops, let's do. So as someone who has network permissions and security permissions, he's able to basically go, as we said before, not do anything with the main dashboard, but he can create both networks, VPNs, and routes. So we're going to create a VPN. So currently, there's a VPN. We're going to connect the front piece, which was the instance, to the back end. And we're going to use the subnetwork that's created, leveraging the subnetwork technology we have. It's in the US Central region. And we create a static IP address so we can do the VPN connection. So we'll use that. Now, on the other side, we need a similar static IP address, which we've locked in for the on-premise example. It's IKEv2, and we need a shared secret. Now, I would not recommend this shared secret because it's a little bit simple, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to go ahead and use that. So now we have to use the local connections here, and then connect to the subnet. Now, for the sake of this demo, we're showing this through menus. But in fact, you can run gcloud in our SDK, so those same commands can be scripted. Or if you're running purely in the services mode, we give you the APIs to allow you to run this too. So at scale, instead of in this simple example, you would be doing this with automation. So let's go ahead and create this VPN. So now it's going to take a little bit of time for the VPN to load. So while we're doing this, we'll talk about what's going on. So as we said before, from the on-premise server, we have the MySQL database. And we're connecting to a front-end instance. Each of the VMs has its own individual firewall. So we had to set up the details for the firewall, and we'll show that in a little bit. The web applications of the front end. Now, each of the individual identities has different control over the settings. The ability to either control the VPN, the firewall, and the underlying pieces. So what we're taking advantage of here is really several things in now that the features on our network. The ability to create private IP spaces so that when you connect to us, you're no longer traveling on the open internet, you're traveling within our private network. And your traffic stays on our private network encrypted as it moves forward. In addition, we're taking advantage of the ability to have subnetworks. The ability to really lock in and segment your trust the way you need to based on how you want to control the connections and access between roles. And finally, we're taking advantage of the VPN. So as you notice now that the VPN connection is green, so we're going to go back and see if we can hit that same node before and see if it's connected. So we are. We're now connected, and we're on our way to full cloud. So basically, we have the database, the MySQL database, connected on the back end. We have the PHP front end serving up traffic. So one of the steps of the ways there, using our network and our AM capabilities to allow us to get there. So lesson number 2. You can create the zones of trust that you need by leveraging the capabilities of the network that we've talked about. In addition, one of the opportunities when you have the front end now on GCP is to also leverage the load balancing that you heard about yesterday in the networking talk, which gives you both performance, scaling, and also amount of DDoS protection built in. So the next thing we're going to talk about is going to full GCP. So going back again to the underlying, let's see here, make sure we're the right person. So going back again from a role standpoint to an owner role, I can take a look at, again, the overall project. Oops. And if we go look at the overall project, we have, in addition to the front end that we just triggered, which is this one, we also have the ability to go back and look at the full LAMP stack version. So what we've done is set up a full LAMP stack version. We've migrated everything over. The other thing, if you guys were paying attention, when I showed you each of the first two, the on-premise one and also the hybrid one, those were actually only in HTTP. So at Google, obviously, we're big fans and implement TLS and SSH. So this is actually a full HTTPS connection on our Google Cloud Platform, implementing the MySQL database as well as the PHP front end. Now, once you get fully on our cloud, the question is, you have now moved your data here. but how do we connect and continue to connect so that you can do this fast? So we have a large number of different ways for you to migrate your data onto our cloud, through VPN, through direct peering, through internetworking. In addition, once your data is in our cloud, really the question is, how do we protect it? So we really give you 3 options of how to protect your data. First, by default, your data is encrypted. And it's actually encrypted 3 ways. The underlying data is first sharded and chunked. Then each of those pieces are encrypted. The chunk key is then encrypted. And then a wrapping key around the chunk key is encrypted. And those are then stored in a key store, which manages and rotates them as necessary. Or if you want to encrypt your data before you give it to us, you certainly have that option. You have full control in that case. Finally, you can give us customer-supplied keys, and then we can go ahead and encrypt things for you without us being able to actually look at your data. Additionally, yesterday I think we talked to you about audit logging. So what we're going to show you is, this is a screenshot. We're going to show you the live logs, again, off of this GCP instance. So what we're seeing here now is the events that created off the firewall. We can look at the events that created off the meme network, which is the subnetwork. And all of those things are accessible to you both in the activity stream. You can search on them. We can filter out purely on activity. We can filter out on looking at a range of resources within all the resources within compute. And if you look at all the different resources, the choices allow you to look at a wide range of both packets, changes in IAM, permissions, and other pieces. So finally, when you think about going on to a platform, it's important that the underlying platform has the governance and the compliance pieces that you need in case you need to run those for your business. So the Google Cloud Platform is regularly certified for SOC 2 and SOC 3, ISO 27001, and then PCI DSS 3.0. And we're engaged in supporting you to get the end-to-end certifications as you run your business partially on our cloud, as well as the other pieces that you're running in your own business. So lesson number 3, once you are comfortable with bringing the data onto our cloud, you're then fully encrypted by default, and you're in TLS everywhere. But this is really just getting you to where you are now moved from on-premise to a cloud environment, but you're still, at this point, using the cloud in a way similar to how you would have before in your on-premise. As we've talked about throughout Next, what we really want you to be able to do is focus on building great apps and great businesses, and let us take care of the operations and really live in a serverless kind of environment. So since we've been talking about security, another thing you may have noticed is, we talked about LAMP stack, but it's all in PHP. So how do you deal with that? Right? So PHP has a range of security vulnerabilities that people try to exploit. And part of that then is for us to implement, as we have, automated scanning for you. So if you bring your applications to our App Engine product, we have in general availability a cloud security scanner. And it's an automated website scanner that basically finds some of the most common vulnerabilities proactively before you deploy. An example here is if you look at the OAuth's top 10, injection, cross-site scripting, components with known vulnerabilities, those are all very common things that occur in web apps and cause breaches. So our security scanner detects cross-site scripting, mixed content, insecure libraries, and in 2016, we'll be rolling out, in addition to SQL injection, and also the ability to scan applications on GCE and other installations. In addition, we'll be able to tie user features around notifications for you and the ability to automate those scans. So now we're going to show you a little bit is how the scanner works. So what we have here is an application which we call firing range. We open sourced that a couple years ago. It is the basis on which most web vulnerability scanners test against to make sure they find sources of cross-site scripting, mixed content, and library pieces. So what we're going to do is show you what one of these scan results looks like. So in this project, we have an application called Public Firing Range. If you're in App Engine, you get a tab that's specifically security scans. And then you're able to look at a range of scan results. So if we look at the scans that we ran last night, it hit 657 URLs in the application and found over 600 vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities range from cross-site scripting, 420 of them, an old library, mixed content. So for example, the particular application uses jQuery that's out of date. So that would be an immediate flag and something you could fix. In addition, we have in detail for the cross-site scripting errors, the ability for you to drill down into each of these errors and in fact both replicate it to find out where it actually occurs in your code, fix it, remediate it, and this is all in development before you deploy to production. So it catches things before they actually hit production. Currently, what we've seen with folks who've used the security scanner is that when it's a cross-site scripting error, once identified, 80% of the users go back and in fact fix it and remediate. So that's a large number of potential vulnerabilities that have been eliminated before any of the code hits production. So the lesson really then is continue to move to higher levels of abstraction. Right? Abstraction and automation are your friends. And we provide you the ability to leverage that today through App Engine, through BigQuery, and through data flow, so you're really living the serverless, kind of no operations mode. And that becomes the next step of what you can do once you've gone from on-premise to hybrid to GCE and then to the true third-generation cloud. So finally, what's next after this? In recap, what we've talked about is identity federation, the ability for you, when you already have in-place installs, to take those with you, for you not to have to recreate them, and for us to basically respect them, enforce the roles and access policies that you had. In addition, we talked about the network security needed to isolate and create the trust zones that you have through VPN, through the subnetworking. Talked about the data protection, the built-in encryption, as well as the control that you have to further encrypt and protect your data. And then we talked about the logging and then the abstractions and automation. So ultimately, what's next after this? From the cloud security side, those of you who've done some of the code labs, the specific details of how we've built each of these pieces, which we couldn't get into today on stage, you can actually walk through each step in the code lab. In addition, the Cloud Security Scanner, highly recommend that you guys try it out. Its ability to find vulnerabilities, its ability to be very, very low noise and high signal so that you can remediate directly. And then on the app side, once it's on GAE, there's a couple different options. We talked about going to App Engine directly or to App Engine managed VMs, where you can bring your own programming system that you're more comfortable and familiar with. Moving the MySQL to Cloud SQL, and particularly for this application, which is image-centric, to take advantage of the machine vision APIs that we have. So with that, again, for us, the ability to go for a third-generation cloud is really the ability to combine security and innovation and really build what's next. So thank you, guys. And both Ameet and myself will be around if you have any questions.